All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody for joining this bidders conference for the Big Library 2020 RFP. My name is Cassandra Patrizio. I am the manager of contracts and grants here at CENIC, and most of you know me also, most of you on this conference know me also as the person that administers all of CENIC's RFPs, particularly the ones that are eligible for E-rate funding, but all the RFPs that we do here at CENIC. And so we communicate a lot when there are questions. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to quickly just give you an overview of how things will flow today. And then I'm going to turn it over to our COO and Senior Vice President, Sherilyn Evans, to talk a little bit about this RFP. So what we're going to do first after the welcome and Sherilyn's comments is I'm going to pull up the RFP document. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, that would take way too long, but I am going to highlight some very specific sections that CENIC would like to highlight for all the potential bidders. Some things are new that we haven't had in an RFP before, and some things are just items that we really want to highlight and remind everybody that these are very important items. Once we finish going over the RFP, we will also be talking about the pricing worksheets, don't worry. If anybody has any questions, there is a group chat window. Hopefully if you're seeing my shared screen, you see it right here. In order to access it, if you can't see it, get your Zoom bar available, click on more and click on chat. And the box should come up. You can type questions here. And once we finish going over the RFP document, we will answer questions that have been submitted via the group chat. So we'll read those questions, we will answer them, and then once we've gone through any of those questions, I will be unmuting the participants one at a time and asking if you have any additional questions, and that will be your time to ask questions. For the rest of the time, you will be muted, and you won't be able, well, you can unmute yourself. I know it gives you instructions, but I would ask that you not do that. If you're having any trouble hearing me, as the notes say on the screen, please check your volume and audio output settings on your computer. If you continue to have problems, just call in using the telephone information, dial-in information that was sent when you registered. I am using the telephone option because I was having trouble with my computer audio. So that's why it says that there's a Cassandra Patrizio, and then there's also a phone number connected, and that's also me. If you're unable to see the shared screen or you just didn't click on the link, that's okay. I don't want you to think that you're missing anything. You're welcome to click on the link and view my shared screen, but if you can't do that, that's fine. And all of the questions from today's conference and any other questions that are received by CENIC regarding this RFP will be addressed. They will be put up and also answered at the Q&A section that is at CENIC's website where the RFP documents live, which is right here. So you can always go there and look at the Q&A. You do have to give it a couple seconds to load. You need to scroll up because it's at the bottom of the screen. But all of the questions are there. And if any of the questions, or actually statements, because I try to put the whole question and answer in the first line. If any of those are truncated for any reason, you can click on the question and it will open up in a larger screen and you can see all of the information. So I know occasionally those get truncated. I try to be creative with how I word things so that they don't get truncated, but sometimes that's just not possible. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sherilyn Evans. As I said, she's CENIC's COO and Senior Vice President, and she's going to talk a little bit about this RFP, why we did the combined RFP, and what makes this different and what we're looking for. So Sherilyn.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for taking the time to care about our RFP and hopefully respond to it. We're looking forward to getting a lot of good solutions for the various folks who are looking for connectivity. For those of you who have participated previously in both the BIIG and the library RFPs, we have not for quite a while done a bidders conference. And so one of the reasons we decided to do a bidders conference is because we haven't done it in a while. And it seemed worthwhile to go over some of the basics with all of you especially those who haven't dealt with CENIC before or have dealt with us very little, so that you have a fair opportunity to bid on these particular services. The other is that we've done something unusual this year. We've combined both BIIG and libraries into the same RFP, and we've added an exhibit that allows you to do a combined bid for groups of sites. They can be multiple K-12 sites, they can be multiple libraries, they can be a combination of K-12 sites and libraries. The idea is that within a specific confined geography, we might get some financial benefit with regard to delivering service to a group of sites if the entire group were given to a single provider, because there is going to be at least some large part of that path shared by the various sites for whom we're seeking to obtain service. And the example I like to give people is that the Clarksburg Library is very interested in a fiber-based solution. We know that there are wireless solutions out there. The library has been extremely adamant that they want a wired solution. And so we also know that the city of Clarksburg is surrounded by water, making it difficult to identify a solution that is fiber-based. We also know that there are schools within a block of the library. And so what you'll see is the schools in Clarksburg are listed in the BIIG section. The Clarksburg Library is listed in the library section. They are all listed together as a group in the D3 exhibit, intended to allow you easier access to see these groupings. So to the degree that you're able to provide a solution for all of them, and it is therefore less expensive for each one of them, we are, for the first time, willing to entertain those types of proposals. And both Khalifa and Imperial County Office of Ed, Khalifa is the administrator for the library funding as a member of CENIC, in the same way that ICOE is the administrative lead for the funds that come to CENIC for K-12 entities. And both Imperial County Office of Ed and Khalifa are aware that we're doing this. They're both very supportive of this. The state agencies from whom they get money, in the K-12 case, the California Department of Education; in the library case, the California State Librarian's Office. Both of these entities have also expressed strong support for this approach. The state's very interested in seeing if we, CENIC, can make this successful. So to the degree that any of you have solutions for sites, groups of sites in that exhibit D3, I encourage you strongly to look at that and offer solutions. As I mentioned at the beginning, we've not done a bidders conference for a while, and so I encourage you not to consider any question to be too stupid to ask. If it's a question in your mind, it's worth raising and allowing us to answer, and you'll benefit all the other people who also had that same question but felt it was too stupid to ask. So when you get to the questions part, please, that's the whole reason for, the primary reason for having this bidders conference, is to clarify anything that we have not made abundantly clear. I'll turn it back over to Cassandra. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherilyn. And I absolutely agree. Please be sure to ask questions when the time is appropriate. So now, as you should be able to see on your screen, if you're watching my screen, I've got the request for proposal up, which, as I stated, is online at CENIC's website. It's online at cenic.org/RFP BIIG-library 2020 RFP. And you can pull up the document there to read it and see what we're asking for. That's also where all of the pricing worksheets live, which you do need to complete and submit as part of your bid. So I'm going to go through this, and again, I'm just going to be highlighting specific areas that we think are very important to highlight that may be new this year because of the different things that we're asking for. The highlights that you see in my document, that was just for me. So don't be worried if when you download the document from our website, it doesn't have these purple highlights. That was just to ping me to talk about that section. So first off, I'd just like to reiterate that there is a due date for this RFP. It is December 9th, 2019 at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We had our time change this weekend. We are now in standard time. All bids must be submitted by 5 p.m. on December 9th. Unfortunately, because USAC does have rules about competitive bidding, we cannot accept bids that are submitted after the deadline. If you're having problems with your email, you need to let me know as soon as possible before that deadline, so that we know to be expecting your bid, or that you might be having trouble. If for some reason you cannot submit your bid electronically, you can submit a hard copy. It is not required, but you can do it, and the address for that is right here. And you should mail those to CENIC with enough time to be received. Any questions about the RFP need to be sent to the email address that is listed in the RFP. Again, USAC has very particular rules about competitive bidding and archiving all of the information regarding that competitive bidding, and it is much easier for CENIC to keep track of all of that information for the many years that they need to keep it if we're getting questions sent to a specific email address. So if you have a question about this RFP, you need to send it to this email address here, which is BIIG-library2020RFP@CENIC.org. Only questions sent to that email address will be answered. If you email someone else at CENIC with a question, I've instructed them to please forward it to this address. You will not get an answer from them. If you email me directly, you will get an answer from me, but I will tell you, you need to send this to this email address. It just makes it a lot easier. I know it seems a little bit onerous, but we have learned recently, in fact, that it's just a lot easier if we can track our information this way when we need to go back and find something because USAC is asking a question. So we appreciate your help with that. So again, the email address is listed here. And then I'm going to start scrolling down. The introduction should look pretty familiar. It's similar to what we've said in the past, but I would like to highlight this third paragraph, which reads, CENIC reserves the right to award all, some, or none of the circuits associated with this RFP. CENIC is acting as a consortium lead for the purposes of seeking proposals and awarding contracts, and will also apply for E-rate and CTF discounts for awarded services on behalf of the members of the consortium. Therefore, any bids that are not eligible for E-rate or CTF must be clearly identified as ineligible by the bidder. So if you are not eligible currently for E-rate or CTF, you must note that in your bid. And I will be getting to a section shortly specifically about this, but if we award you a service, you must be eligible for E-rate or CTF by July 1st of 2020. So you can bid on this RFP if you are not currently eligible, but you must be eligible by July 1st, 2020 in order for us to move forward with any award we might give you. If you are not, we will reserve our right to cancel that award with no penalty, and there'll be another section about that shortly. So first item that we wanted to highlight. Again, just highlighting that the due date is Monday, December 9th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Another reminder that any questions or points of clarification that are received by CENIC, including those covered by this bidders conference, will be posted with CENIC responses online at our website, cenic.org/RFP. /BIIG-Library 2020 RFP. Next, we talk about our basis for award. I'm not going to go over that. It's pretty clear what our evaluation criteria is. I'm going to scroll past a number of these items, which are very similar. You should read all of these things, but these are areas which we've had in every RFP that we've done in the last several years. And now I'm going to move on to the second section, which is the required administrative responses. The opening paragraph here is very important, and so I am going to read it and discuss it briefly. Bidders must, and that's capitalized MUST, respond to all required items. Incomplete proposals may, at CENIC's sole discretion, be considered non-responsive and rejected. Throughout this section and the accompanying appendices, the capitalized words must and shall are used to indicate requirements that are mandatory and must be addressed for a response to be considered complete. The capitalized words may and should are used to indicate desires on CENIC's part that are not requirements. However, service providers are expected to respond to each of these either by meeting the desire or by providing an alternative approach to meeting the desire. I'm going to pause there for just a second, just to reiterate, we've gone out of our way to really be clear that when we say some bid proposal must have something, we mean it. And so it's very important that you pay attention to those words and that you take note of them in your proposal. The last sentence in this section is new and is very important. Please note for Exhibit D3, so we have 3 pricing worksheets. They are labeled Exhibit D1, Exhibit D2, and Exhibit D3. For Exhibit D3, for the Exhibit D3 sites, alternatives will not be entertained. For those sites, CENIC is looking for fiber-based solutions only. So again, we have Exhibit D1, which is for the BIIG sites by themselves. We have Exhibit D2, which is for the libraries by themselves. And then we have Exhibit D3, which is the geographic groupings that Sherilyn mentioned in her intro. And for those groupings, CENIC is looking for fiber-based solutions only. So please take a note of that and address it accordingly. But that is what we're looking for those groupings. So if you're going to submit a bid for a grouping where you're trying to connect several locations that are geographically close, we're looking for a fiber-based solution there. Next section, Section A, federal and state discounts. This is harkening back to what I was talking about previously. You do not have to be currently eligible for E-rate or state CTF discounts in order to submit your proposal. However, the respondent will be required to have a SPIN, a USAC service provider identification number, in place by July 1st, 2020, and to complete all requirements for eligibility to participate in the E-rate and CTF programs by July 1st, 2020, or any associated awarded contract will be considered null and void. So again, in order to submit a proposal in December, you do not have to be eligible for E-rate or CTF, but you must be eligible for E-rate and CTF by July 1st, 2020, in order to receive the business that any awards would have resulted during the RFP process. As most of you know, we have to make our award decisions by the E-rate deadline, which is typically at the end of March, but we cannot start services for any of those awards until July 1st. So that's where this date comes into play, and that's why we state that we may award you something even if you aren't currently eligible for E-rate and CTF, but as long as you get that eligibility by July 1, we will move forward with that award. If you do not get that eligibility, we will rescind that award and probably award the services to potentially another bidder if there was another bidder. So it's really important to note that It's very important to note that it's for E-rate and CTF. We require that the service provider participate in both programs in order to receive this business. Next section, contract period, is pretty self-explanatory. So the next section is the discussion about commencement of billing. I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we'll discuss. In no case is a service provider allowed to commence billing on a new service until a CENIC representative confirms successful completion of CENIC's acceptance testing procedure. Furthermore, circuit installation dates are to be coordinated between CENIC and the provider. A provider may not unilaterally establish installation dates. However, for the sake of expediency and to improve the installation timeline, there may be specific cases where payment of one-time, non-recurring costs in advance of circuit installation and possibly outside of the E-rate window may be requested by the provider. CENIC will review each request and may, on a case-by-case basis and at CENIC's sole discretion, grant such requests. So the things to point out here, for a lot of the providers that are on this call, you already have master service agreements with CENIC in place, and the majority of those master service agreements do state that an installation timeline will be worked out between the provider and CENIC. That absolutely needs to be happening if we are awarding you services and we are beginning to move forward with installation of those services. You guys need to be working with folks here at CENIC to create that installation timeline. And we all need to be on the same page about when that's happening. And, you know, if CENIC is stating that they need something by a certain date, you know, we all need to work together to make that happen. As far as commencement of billing, no billing for any kind of service, any monthly recurring cost can be billed prior to the service being installed and being accepted by CENIC. And that's also laid out in master service agreements, and I think we've been pretty great, all of us, providers and CENIC, regarding that area. Regarding non-recurring costs, we understand that sometimes to improve an installation timeline, the payment of one-time non-recurring costs prior to that circuit installation happening may be requested and may be needed. And so moving forward with this RFP, those requests are going to be granted on a case-by-case basis. So, you know, that might mean that when we're doing awards and contracting in March, the provider wants to put something in the contract document about when that payment would happen. CENIC will review that and negotiate that as necessary. If we don't have something in the contract document, then the provider will need to get in touch with CENIC to discuss. In no cases will invoices be paid that are just sent upon award without any kind of discussion or consideration from CENIC. And it will be at CENIC's sole discretion on a case-by-case basis whether or not we will grant requests for payment of non-recurring costs ahead of installation. So this is a little bit different than the wording in the past, and we wanted to point that out. Next, regarding pricing, as I mentioned earlier, and now I'll talk about it in a little more detail, bidders must respond using the RFP pricing worksheets, exhibits D1, D2, and D3. And responses cannot be in PDF or locked spreadsheets. So do not lock the spreadsheet. Do not change the spreadsheet, please. Don't hide anything. I know why you do it. It's easier for you when you're trying to submit your bids, but when you save the final document to submit to us, please just make it look like it looked before you started filling it in. It's a lot easier for us when we get to the evaluation stage. Supplemental pricing explanations are acceptable as long as the required pricing worksheet is used. So if you want to give us some other kind of option for pricing, you are welcome to use another tab on the pricing worksheet and put that information in there. You do need to point it out to us so that we don't miss it, but you're absolutely welcome to do that as long as you're using the pricing worksheet as we presented it. And so now I'm going to pull them up, and I'd like to just go over them briefly. Exhibit D1, as I stated earlier, is for the BIIG circuits. It should look pretty familiar to anyone that's ever bid on an RFP with CENIC before. I would like to point out right down here, starting at line 38, we also did include one K-12 node site in this RFP because we needed to, and we were getting ready to publish this, and it just was simpler and easier to provide that rather than doing a whole new RFP. We thought it would be easier for you folks as well. You don't have to juggle different due dates or anything like that. So this is all BIIG sites that are currently looking for services, and the one K-12 node site. So school sites listed alphabetically, addresses, Z location addresses, and then as you scroll over to the right, you will see the different pricing options that we're looking for. 100 megabits point-to-point, 100 megabits switched Ethernet or service provider cloud aggregation, etc. So again, this is just for individual BIIG sites. You want to bid on a number of these schools individually. This is where you would put that information and submit it to CENIC. Exhibit D2 is for the libraries. Also very similar to BIIG, should also look very familiar. There are going to be a few other things that I'm going to point out. This Exhibit D main tab is for quite a few libraries that we are looking for. They are individual libraries, and in some cases they are, or in all cases, they are grouped either by jurisdiction or by system. I'll scroll down a bit to find a system. Here we go. The ones we get to the highlighting in line 121, and Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, the ones that are highlighted in a different color, these are circuits that actually already have, these libraries already have service, but we're at the point where we're going out for them for renewal.
Sandra?
Yeah.
It's actually the opposite. So
the exact opposite. Thank you. Okay, please explain.
So the top half, the non-highlighted portion, so up until row 120, those are sites that already have existing connections, so they are either renewals, upgrades, or technology changes. And so you may already have a current contract with these sites, but the contract is coming to term, or the site is seeking an upgrade, or they require a technology change. The bottom half, starting at row 121, they might be sites that we have already gone out to bid for in previous years, but they are they never moved forward due to budgetary reasons or something of the sort. So these are new to CENIC still at this time. So you may have seen them in the past, but this is going out to bid again.
Thank you, Susan. That's really helpful. I will probably ask you to jump in when I talk about these next. When we talk about these next tabs. So that's the main tab. Please note that there are two other tabs on this exhibit. So the second tab is labeled SJVLS. That stands for San Joaquin Valley Library System. And so we've done a special tab for them, and I will let Susan talk about what that is regarding.
So first of all, one of the main reasons we did a separate tab for this is because they are quite a large system that require a lot of consideration and separate tabulation. So for our ease of use and for your ease of review, it was created. The secondary reason is because a lot of these jurisdictions within the system have host circuits currently existing, but due to upgrades or potential upgrades, they require an increased bandwidth for their host circuit. So for example, row 22, it has an A location of Fresno, row 21. Fresno headquarters, and the Z location just says host circuit. We are looking for an upgrade to their host circuit for collector service. If you are not currently the carrier of the host circuit, we are still looking for potential collector circuit options for SJVLS because they want to keep utilizing that kind of structure and configuration.
Okay, and we have kind of separated these out by jurisdiction, so that's why we have them separated by the black bar and color coded. That's all that coloring and coding means, is so that you can clearly see that these are the different jurisdictions within the San Joaquin Valley Library System. And then the third tab on this pricing worksheet is for collector circuits. Susan, you want to talk about that briefly?
Yes, so we have several renewals that, or several sites that the contract is terming out on because this is year 5. We started 5 years ago. So these sites already have existing collector circuits that they wanted to see if they can get another collector circuit for their next contract, 5-year contract. So in past years, we haven't requested directly collector circuit options. We've come back later and analyze that as an option. But in this case, because they already have existing collectors, we wanted to see what the pricing was for collectors again, so they can keep their same configurations and connections in place. The one thing to note, similar to the SJVLS sites, we have the A location listed and the Z location is listed as host circuit because we are looking exclusively at the host circuit for bids as opposed to a connection back to CalREM, as you can see on the Exhibit D main. So these sites are listed on the Exhibit D main and the collector circuits because we are looking for both options as a way to see what we can get for these sites.
Great, thank you, Susan. And then last but not least is Exhibit D3, which is the geographic groupings that Sherilyn touched on earlier in her intro. So here we go. I've separated them by color and with the black bar just to make it hopefully a little bit clearer that the groupings that are colored together go together. These are the groupings that we're looking for. And as I said earlier, for Exhibit D3 specifically, we are searching for fiber-based solutions for these groupings. I'm not sure if Sherilyn or anyone else on the call wants to talk briefly about how a bidder might go about providing this this type of solution and what exactly we're looking for when we have an A location and a Z location. Can anyone speak to that?
So,
thank you.
This is Sherilyn. It's the case that we looked for sites in the library RFP that are in traditionally hard to serve areas. We then looked for BIIG sites that were also in those close to those geographies. In some cases, I think they may be a little far away, but in most of the cases we tried to do close. Obviously, Clarksburg is the closest match. It's important to note, however, that the Z location for a library differs from the Z location for the school. And so what you'll have is a group of sites where the A locations differ and the Z locations differ, but we're hoping there's some middle mile infrastructure that those sites have in common, such that if you were awarded all of the sites within any given group, the shared cost of delivering to all of those sites, even though both ends may separate out to different A and Z locations, the common fiber path between those sites would be a shared cost and therefore less expensive than if we had them as individual awards. And you as providers have no confidence that we're going to award multiple of these sites to you. So Exhibit D3 is saying, take as a given that these sites can be awarded together as a group, and therefore, what can you do to maximize common fiber path such that the cost overall for each of the sites will be less because we're sharing the cost of the build. We are looking for, to be very clear, we are looking for you to light the fiber, not for you to provide dark fiber for CENIC to light. And we're looking for you to deliver the bandwidth that is specified for each of the sites within each grouping.
Right here in column K, we specify the bandwidth we're looking for. Thank you, Sherilyn. And one other point I will just make regarding the need for fiber-based solutions. This is due to funding restrictions, specifically for these pairings or groupings. So we are unable to make awards for the groupings that are wireless solutions at this time. That's why we keep kind of pushing on the fact that we're looking for fiber-based solutions for the groupings. So Exhibit D3 only. Exhibit D1 and Exhibit D2, we're looking for anything and everything that you want to provide to us. So go ahead.
Cassandra, I just wanted to make one more note regarding the D3 exhibit. Sure. For some of these sites, we did put 2 alternative Z locations. I think the examples we have here are rows 30 and 31, 45 and 46. So like Palisades or Hogland Zinnia Elementary, we only intend to award 1 circuit, but these are 2 Z location options for these services. We wanted to really cast a wide net to see if we can bring fiber to these sites. But for ones that are duplicated on D3, we are only we only intend to award to 1 circuit. I just wanted to make that note.
So bid whatever is most cost effective for you and can give us the best pricing.
Great, thank you both. That's really helpful. So now I'm going to move back over to the RFP document. And just a reminder again that please, submit your pricing on those pricing worksheets. Please don't lock or put your worksheets in PDF. Like I said, I understand why people hide columns and rows when they're doing their bids, but if before you send it to us, you could unhide everything so that we get something that looks very similar to what the original blank worksheet was, we would appreciate it. It just makes it a lot easier for us when we start doing our evaluation. Now I'm going to move down to kind of reiterate some things that we've already said, but I'll go ahead and read this section again regarding pricing. For Exhibit D3, CENIC is seeking bids to provide services jointly to multiple sites within a specified geographic area, which are grouped by color on the worksheet. Bidders may submit proposals with shared cost for one-time, non-recurring costs for segments of the build in common. For example, the portions of the build that will be shared to reach all sites within a grouping. Portions of the build that are unique to one site within the grouping must be allocated separately. So we're looking for you in this worksheet to provide us with multiple pieces of pricing information. We want to know what the one-time cost would be for the build to the, I'm sorry, Sherilyn, I can't remember what you called it, the central kind of location that would then allow you as a provider to branch off to the different actual sites. We want one non-recurring cost price for that. And then we want pricing for the portions of the build that are unique to one site within the grouping, and we need that allocated separately. I'm sure you can understand it's because we're working with 2 different populations, K-12 and libraries, and they have 2 different, funding sources where they get their money. And so they're each going to want to know what is our share of this solution. So that's why we're asking for this. Anything else that I missed or could have explained better, anyone?
No.
Okay, thanks. Continuing on, still discussing pricing and how to provide that to us. I didn't highlight this, but just a reminder, special construction costs, which are oftentimes different than non-recurring installation costs, must be separately identified on a per service basis. So please be sure to do that. But more importantly is the next section, which I will read and then go over. CENIC will not be responsible for any easement/right-of-way costs incurred by the bidder while implementing the solution. The minimum point of entry and demarcation point at each site shall be determined by CENIC or its customers, and all cost proposals must include pricing to install services to the minimum point of entry, or MPO, and extension to the demarcation point, again, which is determined by CENIC and or its customers. So I wanted to point that out, and I also wanted to let you know that once we get to the award and contracting phase of our E-rate process, we will be putting language like this in our contracts. We will be requiring that this year because this is a really important point that we need to be very clear who is responsible for what. So again, CENIC will not be responsible for any easement or right-of-way costs incurred by the bidder while implementing the solution. The minimum point of entry, the MPO, and demarcation point at each site will be determined by CENIC and or its customers, and all cost proposals must include pricing to install services to the MPO and extend it to the demarcation point. Next, if special construction costs are not specified or are specified as $0, the bidder will be responsible for construction up to the MPO and extension to the demarcation point at each site as determined by CENIC or its customers at no cost to CENIC. So this is very important, and we wanted to highlight it just to make sure that there's no ambiguity. As you all know, E-rate is a federal program, and the funds that are being used for it are federal funds, and as such, they have a lot of rules and guidelines about how we're allowed to use these funds and what we're allowed to use them for. And so when we get a bid that states that a cost is going to be X amount of dollars, and we sign a contract that says that the cost is going to be X amount of dollars, the expectation for the use of the federal funding is that it will be used on that X amount of dollars number. And we start to get into complications and challenges when the cost increases after the fact of awarding and contracting. So we wanted to make this very clear. There are many service segments and pricing alternatives being requested. We know that. We're asking you for a lot of different information. It's the responsibility of each bidder to ensure that the correct pricing has been input in the pricing worksheets, and that the correct information as to discounts has been entered. So we really are relying on you to provide us with the correct information. This information will be used extensively in evaluating responses and awarding service contracts. CENIC relies on each bidder to provide information that is free from errors or omissions. Once submitted, bidders will be held responsible to provide service at the prices proposed and quoted. All services eligible for federal or state discounts must be expressed in rates before CTF or E-rate discounts, including all estimated taxes and surcharges. Optional pricing for annual prepayment or for multi-year prepayments may be considered by CENIC. So the gist of this is that in addition to, if you're not telling us what the special construction is up front, we do expect you to construct all the way to the MPO and extend to the DMARC at your cost. We also expect that you're going to provide us with pricing in these worksheets that is correct and clear of errors or omissions. Because once we get those worksheets, that's when we start our evaluation, and we're comparing you to other bids that we've gotten, and based on the USAC guidelines for requiring that we look at price first and foremost, and then look at other areas, we really need that information to be accurate. And so we ask that you be very careful in your responses and that you provide us with as accurate information as possible. Lastly, in the pricing section, I'm just going to reiterate, or no, this is different. I apologize. I'm sorry, this isn't in the pricing section. The next section is contract, supersedure, assignment, and successors. For the BIIG project, which we've been doing now for 5 years, many of you have experienced the CENIC reserving the right to supersede these contracts after about a year or 18 months to the school entity that is receiving the service. And our expectation with the supersedure is that we will transfer, we're basically just transferring the whole thing. CENIC was the customer of record and had the contract, and now that contract is going to be moved to the school site, and they will be the customer of record in the billing entity. Our expectation is that all the terms and conditions for the contract that CENIC signed will apply to the new billing entity. Our expectation is that the school will then, once this is completed, as of July 1st of whatever year we're doing the supersedure, they will begin to be billed. And our expectation is that this is simply a paperwork situation. We're simply transferring title, if you will. We're simply changing the contracting entity from CENIC to the school. We are not asking for, nor are we expecting the bidders to do anything special with the circuit, to change its design or configuration in any way, to turn it off and reinstall it, nothing like that. The circuit is in place, the service is working perfectly. All we are saying is that we now want to supersede the responsibility of contracting and billing to the school site. That's what supersedure is, and that's what CENIC expects it to be. We send out notifications, usually at the beginning of the calendar year, to let you know which sites will be superseding that year. And then we work with you, both CENIC and representatives from K-12 HSN will work with you to get all of the paperwork done and to make this process complete and finished so that the school sites can apply for E-rate funding and get the E-rate funding that they need by the beginning of the next fiscal year. So I just wanted to point that out. We've been doing this for quite a while. It's been getting smoother and smoother each year, but I just wanted to remind you. And then, because we're doing different things this year, for sites that are listed on Exhibit D3, so again, those are those geographic groupings, CENIC is reserving the right to not only supersede the services, but to create the transfer of service agreement themselves. So rather than asking you, the carrier, to provide us with a transfer of service agreement to review and get the school to sign, we're reserving the right to create that agreement ourselves, and also to require that those agreements be signed when we award you these services. And the reason that we're doing this is to ensure efficient transfer. We have had some challenges with timelines in terms of getting these things transferred over, and it's not, I'm not trying to lay the blame anywhere. I'm not saying it's a carrier issue. It's just, it can be challenging. Some of these schools are very small. Some of them have other entities that they have to get contracts to go through, and so sometimes things can take longer than expected. So we are reserving the right to create the document and to require that they be signed early, rather than at the time that we say, hey, we want to supersede this service. It's expected that It's expected that the services will be superseded to public educational entities 6 to 18 months after the services are installed. Therefore, bidders will be required to accept the transfer of service agreements created by CENIC and signed months in advance of the actual transfer date. So if we get bids on these groupings and if we move forward with them, we will likely have a transfer of service agreement put together that we will want both the carrier and the educational entity to sign up front before anything even gets installed. And then once the installation is complete, service has been in place for a while, and now it's time for us to actually transfer that responsibility for the service over to the educational entity. We will expect that the carriers will accept those transfer of service agreements that we had signed early. So that is going to be a requirement. If necessary, we will ask for language in the contract documents upon award to reflect that. But we wanted to point that out because, you know, we're always looking for ways to make these processes more efficient and easier for everybody involved. And we think that this might help in some ways. So wanted to put that out there. Next, time is of the essence. We've had this section in our RFP before, but we wanted to highlight it. We have made a few changes, so let me read that. CENIC anticipates that services awarded through this RFP shall be delivered and operational within the next fiscal year, meaning July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. Bidders must provide an estimated timeline for installation of the services. Bidders' response must indicate in their respective pricing sheets the number of days in calendar days required to install the service proposed. If the bidder estimates the service will take 120 calendar days or more to deliver from the date of the order, and or in cases where there is significant special construction involved, the bidder must include a reasonable explanation for the longer time required for service delivery. The FCC's second modernization order outlines the conditions where E-rate applicants may request a single one-time extension for special construction. Any bidders of special construction must submit proposals with the understanding that no extensions for implementation will be allowed beyond June 30th, 2022. So that's really important to note. You know, that's a whole additional year past the timeline we put in the first paragraph, but the FCC does have that option to not allow us to extend beyond a single one-time extension on the timeline for sites that include special construction. So please keep that in mind. The above notwithstanding, all circuits listed in this RFP are subject to required approvals. So CENIC is the customer of record and is managing this RFP, but as we pointed out at the top, we are serving as a consortium lead for other members of the community. And therefore, it's not just CENIC's decision as far as what gets awarded and also what gets moved forward past award to actual order. And as you all know, the E-rate deadline is in March, and sometimes our colleagues at these other entities cannot make their decisions by the E-rate deadline. They don't have the option to do that, but we have to make awards so that we can file for the E-rate funding. Therefore, we want you to remind you that all circuits listed in this RFP are subject to required approvals. CENIC reserves the right to terminate any circuit awarded without penalty should it not be approved. And let me be clear here. What I mean is we awarded the circuit, we signed the contract prior to the E-rate deadline, but we haven't actually started the process for you to start doing installation. We haven't called you and said, hey, or filled out paperwork, whatever our process is with each particular vendor, and said, hey, we want you to start working on this circuit. We've simply awarded it to you, and we have a contract where we listed it as a potential service that we want to move forward with. So we reserve the right at that point to terminate any circuit that's awarded without penalty should it not get approved. Bidders must agree that they shall not begin any work nor invoice CENIC for any cost until such time that CENIC provides written confirmation of approval. This item is non-negotiable, and bidders must agree to this to be considered responsive. So this is not new. We've been doing this for the last several years. We do require language in our contracts upon award that basically says this. That you should not start any work, you should not invoice us for any cost until such time that CENIC provides written confirmation of approval. We just wanted to point it out again because we will be continuing with this, and we know that it can present a challenge, but it's a challenge for all of us that we just need to accept and work around. And we've done a really good job, I think, in the last several years of accepting this and moving forward, but I wanted to make sure if there was anyone new on the call or just anyone that couldn't remember, because all these things flow into each other, let you know what's happening and if that is a requirement. So again, this is a required non-negotiable. We will be requesting that this kind of language we put into contracts. So please keep that in mind when you're creating your bid and submitting your bid. Scrolling through, I'm done with section 2, and now I just want to briefly touch on section 3, which is the required technical responses. I highlighted the opening paragraph again, but it's the same as the one in section 2, which essentially says that bidders must respond to and acknowledge all the required items Incomplete proposals may, at CENIC's sole discretion, be considered non-responsive and rejected. And a reminder that throughout this section, the words must and shall indicate requirements that are mandatory and must be addressed for us to consider your bid complete. The capitalized words may and should are used to indicate desires on CENIC's part that are not requirements. And again, I'll just say it again, for sites in Exhibit D3, alternatives will not be entertained for those sites CENIC is seeking fiber-based solutions only. And so then we get into a description of the service requirements and what specifically we're looking for. And I'd like to make one final note regarding Metro Ethernet services, where Metro Ethernet MEF standards compliant services are being proposed. Such services must provide transparent support of customer VLAN tags from CE to CE. For example, EPL, ELAN, and E-tree-based services, but not EVPL, EV-LAN, or EV-tree-based services. So again, this is not new language. We've had this in our RFP for several years now, but we thought it was good to highlight. We are specifically looking for EPL, ELAN, and E-tree-based services, not EVPL, EV-LAN, or EV-tree-based services. So please make a note and take that into consideration when you submit your bids. And with that, I think that is it for the RFP document. I will reiterate once more that I did not go through every section of the RFP, but we do expect for you to read the entire RFP and respond accordingly where we say must and shall. And again, if there are any questions after today, we are going to do a Q&A shortly, but if there are any questions after today, you can always email the RFP email address and we are happy to respond. So you should absolutely read the document, and if there are any questions, please let us know. That holds true for the pricing worksheets. If there are any questions about the pricing worksheet, you have a question about an address, you have a question about a grouping, anything like that, please let us know, and we will address them as needed. So I'm going to look at the group chat. We are going to handle those questions first. While I'm just glancing at that and kind of getting it together, if anybody from CENIC has anything else they would like to add before I start answering these questions, I will call on you guys to help me with answering these questions. Please submit, please go ahead and speak now and give me just a minute to go through these questions and get ready to talk about them, and then we will go from there. Okay.
So I think from our angle, we addressed everything. We'll be happy to assist with the questions, but from the review process, from the review that you just gave, I believe we touched on everything that we had to.
Okay. So as I said up top, I'm going to start with the questions in the chat. I'm going to read the question, and then myself or someone else from CENIC will answer the question. And then once we've gone through all the group chat questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to unmute, not everybody, well, yeah, I guess I will. I'm going to unmute people from the different carriers represented one at a time, so one carrier at a time. And then I'll say, for example, GeoLinks, do you have any other questions? And you'll be unmuted, and that will be your time to ask questions and have CENIC answer them. So don't worry, again, if you don't have the chat available to you, I will get to you and you will be able to ask questions as well. Just let me get through these chat questions first. There's only a few of them, and then we'll go from there. All right, everybody? So the first question we have actually was from GeoLinks in the chat, and the question is, does non-recurring include special construction? I want to say yes, but I'm going to punt it over to my colleagues to respond to that.
Yes, the answer is yes.
All right, so when we're talking about non-recurring costs, we are also including any special construction costs. That is the answer. All right, next, Rhonda, I see that you said please disregard my question, and I think we mostly answered it while we were talking about the pairings worksheet anyway. So I will move on from that one. Rick asked, are you including data center cross connects, and how do you want that listed as a UNI cost or separate item?
So we do want that cost listed for one-time and reoccurring costs. So that could be included in the same format as it is currently laid out. So include the monthly recurring cost of the cross connect in the monthly recurring cost, and then there should be one-time costs that are listed, one-time and special construction costs. So we do want that included in the cost evaluation. So that way we can apply for E-rate for them.
Okay, let me really quick here. Okay. I was going to try to unmute Rick to see if that answered his question, but he is not on the audio. So next question from Michael Hogan at Comcast. How does CENIC envision service providers including pricing to a demarcation extension if we do not have the demarcation extension location as part of the RFP?
It's a reasonable question that Mike has. The reason that we don't do it is because we ourselves don't know if the site is going to have a demarc that goes beyond the MPO. To the degree that you can absorb those costs, I know that at times providers have given bids and simply absorbed those costs. In some cases, providers don't have the kinds of margins that allow them to absorb the costs. You might want to include some margin for that in your bid responses. But if we knew that for all of these sites up front, we would certainly have put it in. We just don't have the cycles to go out to each of these sites ourselves and understand where there are those cases where the MPO and the DMARC differ.
Thank you, Sherilyn. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but like Sherilyn said, we just don't have the resources to be able to provide that level of specificity. Philip from GeoLinks asked if we could go over the SJVLS tab on the D2 worksheet again, which we would be happy to do. So I'm going to pull up that worksheet, click on SJVLS, and then Susan, if you could just go over this again, like why we have a separate worksheet, how it's put together, and what we're looking for.
Okay, so just to clarify, this is not an all or nothing scenario. You can bid on individual sites for connections. We just separated it out because it is quite a large mass of sites, and we do analyze it as a group because it is within the same system. So that being said, we do have connections to our CalRen hub sites listed that we are looking for connections for, as well as branches that are looking for connections back to their main location. In addition, we also have host circuit requests. So in the cases of the host circuits and the collector circuits, they could potentially have every single branch listed underneath it. So for example, for Fresno, we have row 22 through 47 that would potentially be connecting into the host circuit. But that, like I said, it is not an all or nothing scenario. We will analyze them every bid accordingly. And if you can only connect one site, that bid will still be included and analyzed. It is not a situation where you have to bid a collector circuit. It is just a request for collector circuit information. Oh, and it'll only be to the one Z location for the hub site. Oh, it'll only be awarded to one Z location. Sorry, I phrased that very poorly. So in most cases, we will only be awarding, for example, Coalinga, we are requesting quotes for 4 different Z locations to our hub sites. we potentially will award just one. In some cases, there may be two, but we are just casting a wide net to try and get as many options as possible. And again, you do not have to bid on everything if you cannot connect to those sites. And you do not have to bid on everything within the jurisdiction or the system. We're trying to just get as many options as possible for these.
Thank you, Susan. Philip, does that answer your question? I've unmuted you.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions we have in the chat. So now we're going to go ahead and, like I said, I'll unmute you by carrier, and then you guys can ask additional questions. So Philip, since you're already unmuted, we'll go ahead and start with GeoLinks. Do you have any additional questions you would like us to address at this time?
No, I think we're good. Oh, one question. In the past, libraries didn't have funds for special construction. So I'm just wondering, is BIG applying to that for this session or this year's funding? So I do notice a tab there, but in previous years, library systems generally didn't have special construction dollars as part of BIG.
So to be very clear to everyone on the call, BIIG is one project that has a specific funding source, the state of California, and that applies only to K-12 schools. BIIG funds cannot apply to libraries. Separate from BIIG, so the first exhibit D1 is for BIIG sites where we can use BIIG funding to pay for the special construction costs for K-12 schools in unserved and underserved areas. The tab, or the exhibit D2 is specific to library sites. BIIG funding does not apply to library sites, and any special construction costs would have to be paid for by the libraries. So bear that in mind with regard to, there is state funding for BIIG sites specifically. For libraries, it's dependent upon their own ability to fund, as well as the degree to which they can apply for and receive any grant funding from the California State Library, which is a separate grant program.
Right, so that touches on part of it, and I know in the past we have requested for libraries special construction charges to be built into the MRC as opposed to a one-time charge. That has not necessarily changed, but in this case they do sometimes get grant from CSL for the one-time charges. Unfortunately, we did not go to every single jurisdiction and request which would you prefer, MRC or a one-time charge. So sorry, I'm not fully able to answer your question, but if you would, it's whatever the preference is to you at this point for ease of use. If we do have questions later on about the pricing changes and everything, we will go back and ask when we're reviewing the bids. But unfortunately, I think it's going to be the same thing where they prefer it to be an MRC, because in most cases that is the preference. But I can't say end all be all. That is what the jurisdictions for libraries want. I hope that answers your question, Philip.
It does perfectly. Thank you very much.
Anything else from GeoLinks? No? Okay. Sorry. Sorry, I saw you mute yourself. So, okay. So we will move on to the next carrier on my list, which is Charter. So I'm unmuting you guys now. Jean or Michael, do you have any additional questions for CENIC?
I don't. Yeah, I don't at this time.
Yeah, same here. I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Thank you both from Charter. Thank you for attending and letting me know. All right, next, let's see. Are you still on? I'll go ahead and unmute these just in case. Next on my list is Hunter Fiber. Is anyone on from Hunter Fiber that has any questions? I don't see her name. I did unmute the few phone numbers that are there, but it sounds like maybe they're not on. So we'll move on. Next on my list, I have AT&T. Let me get you guys unmuted. Oh, they keep bopping around. I think I got everybody. AT&T, do you have any questions for CENIC?
Hi, just one question on the San Joaquin tab again. Does the same philosophy for the highlighted, non-highlighted for tab 1? Is that the
No.
same philosophy?
No, I apologize. Okay. I should have used a different color. All of these are mixed up. Some of them are new circuits, some of them are renewals, some of them are upgrades. It was just highlighted to separate out the jurisdictions.
That's exactly what my technical person said, but I wanted to ask the question. Thank you.
Okay.
No problem. Thanks for asking. It is a good question. Any other questions from AT&T? All right. Let's see. I don't see a name, but I do have all the phone numbers unmuted. Is anybody on the call from Crown Castle, and do you have any questions? Okay. Moving on. INYO COE. I think I have you unmuted. Are there any questions from INYO?
No, INYO network's fine.
INYO's fine. Okay, great. Thank you. Comcast. Let me get you guys unmuted. Mike, do you have any additional questions from Comcast?
No, Comcast doesn't have any additional questions. We do appreciate the opportunity going through the proposal again, though. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Next on my list is Cox. Sally, I don't know if you're on via one of these telephone calls. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, but no, we have no additional questions.
Okay, great. And last but definitely not least, Frontier. Does Frontier have any additional questions for CENIC?
Hi, no, thank you so much. We appreciate the opportunity as usual.
All right. Well, that, I believe, is everyone on my list. I'm just going to, I see someone, Marco Moran. I don't recognize the name. Are you from Mr. Moran, are you from a carrier? And do you have any questions?
No, I'm from Cox.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't have you on my list, but I know some people registered right when I started, and I haven't looked at it since. So, okay. Thank you so much. I'm just double checking to make sure I didn't miss anyone else that is on this list. I think I got everybody that isn't a CENIC person. So I want to say thank you to everyone for attending this bidders conference. As I said up top, we will be transcribing these questions and putting them on our website at the where the RFP lives, which is cenic.org/BIIG-library 2020 RFP. So we will transcribe everything we talked about here today and put that up. In addition, until the deadline of the RFP, which is December 9th at 5 p.m., you can submit a question to CENIC and we will answer it. The email address to submit questions is BIIG-library 2020 RFP at CENIC.org. That question comes into CENIC. We have an internal group that reviews the questions and provides an answer, and then that answer gets sent back out to you, typically from me. So it looks like it's coming from Cassandra Patrizio at CENIC. And we try to turn those questions around in about 48 hours. If you send it on a Friday, it might take a little bit longer than that, but we do try to get those turned around in a fairly quickly manner. And then once those questions are asked and answered, we also put those on the Q&A for anyone else within the community that might also have that question. So you should always be checking there just to see if a question you have has been answered already, but you should also feel free to submit a question using that email address, which is also the same email address that you should send your bids to. So one last time, I'll remind you that the deadline is December 9th at 5 p.m. And if you have any questions, please send them our way. We're happy to answer them. And that will be it for us. Unless we get questions from you, we'll expect to get your bids delivered to CENIC on the 9th of December. And after that, we'll move into our evaluation process. And as most of you know, the E-rate deadline does come in March. It's typically at the end of the month. So that's when we will be making our decisions by, no later than that. So if you are, you know, getting antsy and wanting to know, hey, what did you decide? Like, just know that we are working towards that deadline, which is at the end of March. So with that, we'll say goodbye, and hopefully you guys have a great week. Thanksgiving's coming up, so I hope everybody that celebrates has a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I really appreciate you all taking the time. So with that, goodbye from CENIC, and have a great day. Bye.